All right, welcome back, and we're going to have a very honest discussion because this storm has taught us so many things that we've had to go back to the drawing board and had everybody shaking their head. But there's still a lot of good things leading up to this, so we're going to try to differentiate what we learned from this storm. And I have a great panel lined up for you today. I have Mr. Chip Kline. He's on via Skype, and he is the CPRA chairman and director. He's the executive assistant to Governor Edwards on coastal activities. And Chip, first of all, we appreciate you being with us. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for having me, Martin. And it's always good to be with Reggie and Gordy.
Yep, and our other panelists up here, the parish president of Terrebonne Parish, Gordon Dove, and also former senator and executive director of the Levee district here in Terrebonne Parish, Reggie Dupre, who, by the way, both chaired the coastal restoration. Y'all on each different end, one as a rep, one as a senate. So y'all gonna have a lot of knowledge to participate on this panel today. But Chip, if we could, let's start with you, sir. Let's talk about, God, this. I know when it's all said and done, because we're looking at the numbers now, we're looking at actual wind speeds. I know when it's said and done, it's gonna be a Cat 5. But what did this teach you? I know we all thought we'd see the worst hurricane one day, and I think we just saw it.
Yeah, well, I think, the number one lesson learned here is that every single dime that has been invested in levee protection and in Lafourche and Terrebonne parishes and across Southeast Louisiana are absolutely worth making. These investments proved that they pay off, that they saved lives, that they saved billions of dollars. And if there's one bright spot in all of this, it's that our levees held across Southeast Louisiana. And I think that there were some anomalies, if you will, some unusual events that happened within the Morganza to the Gulf system. But look, these levee risk reduction systems essentially paid for themselves during Hurricane Ida. I mean, if you would not have had Wendell's levee system in place in LaRose to Golden Meadow, if you wouldn't have had Morganza, all the work that President Dove and Reggie and Tony have done over the last several years, you would be looking at a much, very different picture on the ground today following Ida than we do see. And so that's not to minimize the damage that we see in Terrebonne and Lafourche parishes, but I'll tell you, a lot of that is attributed to wind. We recognize the power outages, the cell phone systems are down. But look, if you were to throw, 6 to 7 feet of surge in populated areas on top of that, you'd be talking about a very different picture on the ground. And so there are lessons learned here, Martin, from what we saw happen in Morganza to the Gulf. I think we probably need to kind of tweak the designs, the engineering and design on some of our floodgates to make sure that we're allowing for water to get out, not just preventing water from getting in. And so I know that Reggie's working very hard to get the Bubba Dove floodgate repaired, and he's actually working very closely with us on those repairs. But these investments are paid off. They're absolutely worth making. We've got to continue to prioritize these investments moving forward.
Let me ask you this, Chip, because I was actually live on the air when the first wave was going through Grand Isle, and we had a roof fly across the camera. And I remember a caller saying, wow, the eye wall is on Grand Isle. And I said, no, the eye wall has not hit Grand Isle yet. This was only the secondary feeder band that was coming through. I was on the phone with Wendell. Of course, he was evacuated at Lady of the Sea. He had no instruments to see how high the surge was coming up. I asked him on the Golden Meadow floodgate where that weld mark is where they made that addition in years past. I said, what mark is that? He said, that's 11 feet. I said, well, we lost that an hour ago. We're at 12 feet right now. They got to 14 feet. That's incredible. Your thoughts on that?
Yep. Well, it is incredible. And I think that the peak surge that we saw actually in around Wendell's system was just over 16 feet. And so, look, sometimes Wendell's construction techniques are frowned upon by the Corps of Engineers, but look, and I'm not making light of this.
Right.
Wendell's efforts and Wendell not waiting on the federal government or going through the regulatory bureaucratic mess of the federal government to construct levees saved lives. It did. Wendell's levee system actually had our attention the most as Ida was coming on shore. If you look at the trajectory of the storm, some of the surge forecasts that we were seeing, we were predicting anywhere from 15 to 17 feet of surge. We were actually concerned about Wendell's levees significantly overtopping, which you didn't see happen. And so, somewhere in Lafourche Parish, there needs to be a statue of Wendell constructed there. And I know in Terrebonne, there'll be one of Gordy and Reggie one day as well.
Yeah, no doubt. And let me just say this, because that small difference where landfall came in, we kept saying Fouchon, Grand Isle, and Weather Channel kept saying Morgan City. But if it would have went into Morgan City, we'd have a whole different conversation right here with Reggie and Gordy. So, and I'm not saying our levees weren't ready for the task, but they would have been looking at 16, 17 feet instead of what came through in Terrebonne. With the wind speed of this storm that we're seeing now and the water it held back, if not for the levees holding, we would have had a Katrina on steroids. Would that be your opinion?
Oh, no doubt about it. No question. No question. I mean, even around the greater New Orleans area, we were hearing projections from the National Weather Service that some of those levees were going to be over top. We weren't seeing that in our surge modeling and our surge predictions. But look, if it had not been for number one, if the storm would have shifted and Terrebonne would have been on the eastern side of that, you would have seen probably more extensive flooding on that side if it had not been for the investments that have been made by the people of Terrebonne Parish, the Terrebonne Levee and Conservation District, and Gordy Dove continuing to prioritize these investments. As you referenced, Gordy and Reggie were both in the Louisiana legislature. The coastal program, we're literally standing on those guys' shoulders now. They created the framework that we operate in as far as how we are structured here in state government. And those guys are to be commended for not only the investments that they've made at the local level, but the leadership they showed continued at the state level as well.
And this would be a good time to bring those two gentlemen into our conversation, Chip. And I guess, Gordy, what we could, there's such a fine line when I'm going down the bayous, and this storm had such a different effect because of the way it skirted Terrebonne Parish, and it empties Lake Boudreaux Basin, or Lake Robinson, however you want to call it, when you live in that area. Can you literally see a storm emptying a complete basin, pushing it over parts of Little Cayenne and Cocodrie, and pushing it over the levee on the other side? I think to start this conversation, we have to talk about the intensity of what we just saw.
Morton, we had a reverse head in Terrebonne Parish of the likes that Terrebonne Parish has never seen. And yes, it pushed Lake Boudreaux, Lake Robinson, which is called the Lake Boudreaux Basin, over Highway 56 in the Petit Caillou, and then pushed it up against, of course, the Cocodrie floodgate, the Petit Caillou floodgate, which had some 72-inch through tubes that was trying to release the water, but there was no way. It was designed to release the water from that situation, but not to that magnitude, so it stacked up on it. And so what is the answer to that? You need to add more through tubes, through the bulkheads, and which we're talking to Chip Kline about at CPRA as we speak.
And we're talking about sector gates too, but could sector gates have withstood that?
Not if they weren't designed for it. Most sector gates aren't going to be designed for that, unless the engineers engineer for it.
Yeah, and that, of course, when you're engineering for a Cat 5 instead of a Cat 3, is probably costs a little bit more money. Reggie, you've seen it, and I guess the trick with this is so many people, and look, I went to interview some well-known people who've had restaurants and houses down there for years, and Zeta and Ida, just did a phenomenon which we've really never seen. So I'm sure as a levee director, you're sitting there and going, okay, and it's fluid, don't get me wrong. You're never going to be completely satisfied with a levee system. If you are, you shouldn't be the executive director. You'll say that too. but it's fluid. So when something happens, I know y'all are already at the drawing board trying to figure out how many sector gates, if that's the way to go, how many flaps you need to put in, how do you manage all this? So I'll give you the floor to explain that.
So Martin, these bars, you got to remember, we build these barge floodgates because they're 1/3 the cost of sector gates, and we had very limited state and local funds. We did not have any federal dollars, and right to date, we have a little over $500 million invested in this Morganza system before we got the first federal dollar just a few months ago. So a barge floodgate is designed for generally a maximum 2-foot reverse head. That means 2 foot of water higher on the inside than the outside. You can't open it with a 2-foot reverse head, but it will withstand that pressure. Until the gauges blew off and we re-registered in the Cocodrie floodgate, at one time the Bayou on the outside was at a -4, and on the inside it was almost a +10. So that's a 14-foot reverse head. Now the Cocodrie floodgate, or Bayou Petit Caillou, the official name, did not structurally fail, and I think it's because of the flow-through tubes. It relieved enough pressure where the structure didn't fail. The H&C Bubba Dove floodgate, on the other hand, was built earlier in 2013. There's no flow-through tubes on it. Although with the Restore Act funding, with the lock, we do plan on replacing that barge and putting flow-through tubes under it. That one failed. That one, all 4 pins broke loose in the pivot arm. So you had 5 holes in that barge and substantial damages. You had a complete failure of the floodgate with a reverse head of about 9 feet in the HNC, and you had a reverse head of nearly 14 feet in Cocodrie. We never anticipated a category 4, maybe looks like a 5, with 150 mile an hour north winds blowing all of this. Of course, we're going to have to look how to mitigate that, how you can reduce it. On the Cocodrie area, if you look at the entire map of Morganza, you'll see that the Cocodrie floodgate and Reach H1 is sort of the bottom of the funnel. That's where it all comes down to. So I don't know if you can ever have enough flaps to totally relieve that situation. I think there may be other mitigation measures we're going to have to consider, such as what the parish president and I have discussed, is building some type of rock dike along the west side of Louisiana Highway 56 to slow down Lake Boudreaux from getting into those populated areas.
To cut the surge.
Cut the surge. Another idea that one of our local engineers, Jason Kennedy, told me, and I think this makes a lot of sense both environmentally and for this purpose. Let's see if we can get some restoration dollars to restore the banks of Bayou of Lake Boudreaux, the actual lake. Build marsh like a land bridge on both the south and north side. That would have substantially cut that 10-foot probably down to 3 or 4, and I think it would have made a huge difference. Of course, we learned in this, we don't have a owner's manual on this Morganza system. It's a leaky levee system, and that's one of the deals in reverse head situation. I don't think it was never considered in when the Corps first started planning this massive system.
Yeah, we never thought, and Chip, I'll come back to you because we never really thought. And in seeing these scenes for myself and seeing where the grass rolls up on the steps at say Sportsman's Paradise, the restaurant now we were filming, and we have drone footage that we could roll in at some point here. It's a catch-22 for the people that live here because, excuse my French, but I'll be damned if they didn't get hit by 10 foot of water and also 180 mile an hour winds. So when the insurance companies are going down there, and most of them have given up their wind insurance, they kept the flood. But the winds, how do you tell at this point when you get that much water and this much wind, which one did the damage? So when you look at this is just a phenomenon in defending you and Reggie and Gordy and trying to be compassionate towards everyone that lost home. This is something the likes that we have not seen. We haven't seen this when we were kids for Betsy. This one just rewrote everything we know about hurricanes.
Yeah, there's no question, Martin. I've had the opportunity to fly over the entire portion of Southeast Louisiana with the governor numerous times. But I'll tell you, flying over it is one thing, but when you actually get on the ground in a vehicle and you travel from LaRose to Golden Meadow, areas around Lower Terrebonne, Lafitte, Grand Isle, it is something that will stick with you for the rest of your life. I know people, I was actually working in Washington, D.C. when Katrina hit, so I don't have any on the ground experience there, but this is something that I will tell you, I will never forget. And I think it is a big enough event that without question, we have the attention of the federal government in a way we haven't had before. And I think the reason you referenced the wind speeds, we're talking about 190 miles an hour in some cases. That is well into a Category 5 when all is said and done. But if there's one bright spot in all of this, Martin, and I think that you've heard the president mention this to the governor. Every single parish president that met with President Biden has said, look, we may not be able to stop the rain from falling from above or the wind, but we can stop the surge coming in where people live and work. And so we're going to be making a damn hard push for $2.6 billion for Morganza to the Gulf. We're going to be making a damn hard push for additional money for Wendell's levee system, even up in the northern Lafourche where Dwayne Bourgeois operates, because we all know it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when we're going to have another storm like this. So there's a lot of lessons learned, as Reggie and Gordy just talked about. But we know, I'm going to go back to what I said in my opening comments, these investments undoubtedly paid off. And there's still other areas that deserve the level of protection that you see around the greater New Orleans area, Lafitte, Grand Isle, even areas in Terrebonne Parish. And that's why we have got to make sure everybody that calls Southeast Louisiana home is engaged in this effort. Too many people outside of hurricane season forget about this. They become lackadaisical and they, we'll worry about that. But this ought to be a good gut check, a good kick in the gut for everybody that lives in Southeast Louisiana, that cares about coastal Louisiana, that cares about coastal restoration, and that cares about hurricane protection, that this issue has got to be at the forefront of federal, state, and local governments for the next several years. Because if not, we're going to continue this on the ground.
I want to commend you. I want to commend the governor. We can go back all the way. We had a time for action in 2005 when Governor Blanco, I think, initiated $10 million. But every governor, Jindal, initiated a lot of money. But I think, I may have this wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, but since Governor Edwards has been in office, $1.3 billion. Does that sound about right, that he's initiated into these areas for levees and protection?
With the islands and everything, at least that.
Okay, so it's not a lack of spending money, and you're going to see when we show the footage tonight on our program with Connie and Stu and Lizzie. We did a show at Cocodrie, that it's just these storms are they're ferocious when they come through. So what was music to my ears, I just heard you say, we have a possibility of getting some very serious money. I think now everybody's sort of focusing on Fouchon too and understanding that 20 to 30% of what's fueling this nation comes from right there. Is that one of the big driving factors?
Oh, there's no doubt about it. I forget what year it was, Martin, but it may have been in 2010, 2011 that Houma, Louisiana had the second to lowest unemployment rate in the entire country.
Yes.
If you look at just the oil and gas industry, the port industry there, the maritime, you name it. This is a huge economic hub for South Louisiana, the entire Gulf Coast, and for huge portions of the country. And while I'm on camera, Martin, I do want to talk a little bit about, and I know we're short on time, but look, hurricane protection systems work. But a lot of people who look at these investments that we're making on the coast, on the restoration side, that's great that you're making those investments. They're going to be washed away by the next storm. Our barrier islands held. Our marsh creation projects held. Our shoreline protection measures held. And so not only did those prove to knock down the storm surge, to slow the storm surge, they proved to be sustainable. So we must continue to invest in those systems that are helping protect the systems that are protecting us. So it's both coastal restoration and hurricane protection moving forward for CPRA.
And let me go to Gordy and Reggie real quick. You know, the federal government always says, what's the payback? You know, what's the cost ratio? What do we get for what we're giving you? And has anyone crunched those numbers, Reggie?
Yes, as a matter of fact, Ignacio Harouche, who works for Chip and Bryn Hawes, called me right before I came on, and he says, we need to figure out what's the benefit side. I said, well, the Corps just re-evaluated it. You got $3.2 billion of a cost at a 4.6 to 1 benefit to cost ratio. Just multiply 3.2 billion times 4.6. And that should be right about $16 billion here in Terrebonne Parish.
Right.
That's
Gordy?
So let's look at the Bogansett to the Gulf system. Last year, we had 7 named storms and hurricanes, no incidents.
Right.
Year before, we had Barry, which brought a 9-foot surge in, basically no incidents. We had a little overtopping because we were under construction.
Right.
Terrebonne Parish has committed $140 million between some lock systems and pump stations. We've increased the pumping capacity of Terrebonne Parish by 60%. 15 to 20 inches of rain came with this system that, you know why we don't talk about it? Because nobody flooded. The only flooding occurred was at that I know of that may have occurred, and we're still evaluating that, is around the Cocodrie floodgate. The Bubba Dove, even though they had problems where the locking system failed, it really didn't cause any flooding because there's nothing really around that area right there. Cocodrie, the gate held back some water and it may have flooded some of those camps. We don't have the reports in on that yet. So the system, like Chip said earlier, it's worked. It continues to work. The pumping capacity of Terrebonne worked because nobody complained about flooding with, you know, and all our pump stations have backup generators. As you know, we added them over the last couple of years.
Absolutely.
We had 2 weeks of no electricity. So what happened in Terrebonne? Right now, 95% of the utilities are restored in Homer, 72% with Sleeker, 60% with Entergy. Of course, the Bayous are the slower one. Homer is back to almost normal. As of Monday, we'll open the government towers, and we'll open part of the courthouse. So, well, actually Tuesday we'll open the courthouse so we can start filing. So the system is working, like Chip said. We need the federal government to give us the money to go in and finish what we started and what the state started.
And Reggie, if I could lobby a little bit, and maybe Chip can join in on this. And when I went to Cocodrie, and I've seen the amount of federal people that have come in to fish off of Terrebonne Parish over the years.
Right.
And they love it. And a lot of fishermen make their living too. And seafood's a big part of Louisiana. And what you said about the Lake Boudreaux Basin is sort of music to my ears because it will sort of take care of that sector. Not all of it, but a good bit of it. So, Chip, is that part of the plan too, to maybe add on that Lake Boudreaux Basin, or are we too early yet and we haven't discussed that? But is that a plan, you think?
I think it's a great idea, Martin, but I think one of the great things about the coastal program is that we have the ability to adaptively manage the coast. As we see different events, different storm, every storm is different. So there's going to be lessons learned from every single storm. And we, without question, learn some valuable lessons on this. And if there's restoration measures that we can do in the Lake Boudreaux area, I'm absolutely open to doing that. I want to go back real quick, though, Martin, to something we were talking about on the federal side. If you look at what President Biden is saying, some of these buzzwords that he continues to say, from green infrastructure to environmental justice to coastal resilience to climate adaptation, those can be political talk sometimes. But Morganza to the Gulf speaks to every single one of those things. So a lot of people say, well, that's kind of, liberal Democrat talk. Well, be that as it may, but Morganza to the Gulf addresses every single one of those. And so the federal government should look no further than the $2.6 billion authorization that's on the books to fully fund an emergency supplemental. And so back to your initial question, though, Martin, I think that in that overall request, we actually need to look at the natural buffer, that surrounds Morganza to the Gulf, whether it be in Lake Boudreaux or Cocodrie, wherever it may be, to restore that natural buffer that's going to help protect that levee system. So I think it's got to be an all-above approach.
Absolutely.
Yeah, amen. And I'm going to, Gordy, go ahead.
Chip, I'd like to add to that, you know, with the PP fine money, which was passed by CPRA, Reggie Dupre and Tony Alford and them at the levee board have just gone under construction on the dredging in of a lock system on the HNC and a retrofit of the Bubba Dove, like Reggie brought up earlier, that's going to solve the problem we just had. We were on our way to solving it. It's just, this is about a 3-year construction, maybe 3.5 years, and it is going to solve the problem of a reverse head like we just witnessed. But this is a $400 million structure that, thanks to Chip Kline, CPRA, and the governor, and we're moving forward on. So, and actually they've awarded the dredging portion of it, which is first, and then they're going to move to the lock system and on the HNC. So that whole system will be retrofitted, and the design is made to take more of a reverse head than what this one barge gate was.
And here's a trick, because when talking to people, when we go down the Bayou areas and we film it and they're talking about it, sometimes I mention, I said, just imagine, let's go back, I've been covering storms since 1985. But let's go back 10 years ago. If this kind of storm would have come in 10 years ago, we'd be looking at a whole nother thing around it. So
Absolutely.
in the last 10 years, so much has been done, but hey, this storm was so ferocious that it taught us things that we'd never seen a storm like that. It taught us a lot of things, and I keep telling people, so we can build on that. It doesn't help the people who lost their homes and shoveling mud out of their homes and all, but still gives us hope that moving forward, we're in the right direction. Because if this storm would have come through 10 years ago in the same direction, a little bit west of Terrebonne Parish,
Well, the original
we wouldn't be talking right
the
now.
original predictions were between Dularge and Morgan City,
Yeah.
Category 4. And you know, Martin, I always told my wife, I said, if I ever call you when the storm's coming and I say it's time, don't argue. It means pack up,
That's right.
get my grandkids, get my mama, and get them out of here. Now I did. I called her up after the Thursday morning briefing. I said, that scared the hell out of me. I said, I can't leave, but I said, it's time.
I was doing that right when I came to work that morning of the storm. I was calling people saying, get out now.
Yeah.
But I never quite seen, we've seen Katrina coming through and it changed directions a little bit, but like I said, this one had everything we didn't want to see, including the direction. Chip, once again, I'll give you the final words on this panel. Thanks again for joining us, and thanks for what you're doing to help us out. So we'll go back to you and let you close and maybe give the people some inspiration on some of the projects that are yet to come.
Martin, thank you very much. Just listening to Reggie's closing comments there just gave me chills. And that's what it's all about at the end of the day, is protecting the people we love, right? And so nobody should ever have to make that phone call to a spouse, to a wife, to grandkids. And so that is what Reggie just said is all the motivation I need to keep working like hell, to get the necessary funding to build the projects that have been envisioned for years. And I'm going to continue to fight like hell alongside Gordy and Reggie and whoever else wants to come into this fold and fight with us. And we're going to do this. We're going to win this. Look, this was a battle in the overall war, and we got a few wounds that we got to patch up. But look, we're gonna keep fighting, keep moving forward. And at the end of the day, when all is said and done, South Louisiana is going to be better protected and more resilient than it ever has been.
All right, Chip, thank you so much for joining us, and Gordy and Reggie, thank you so much. And
Thank you, Chip.
And it was good to hear that we got some plans for Lake Boudreaux, and they might get a rock system going. So for the people over there that are despairing, that have been there, part of that community for many, many years, you're hearing some positive things coming off the news desk today, and we appreciate the dialogue. And I always tell people, don't always come with the problem, come with a solution. Seems like we're moving forward. We're going to keep moving forward in some very tough times. So we'll sign off now. Thanks to the panel again. Thanks to Chip. We'll see you again on a later program.